economy. And people are naturally fearful, uncertain. They're anxious about their jobs. They're anxious about job security. They see automation and robotics coming in and think, well, I'm out because they're replacing me with a machine. And it's not about that at all. It's about upskilling. I mean, even now we've probably got 1 million vacancies within manufacturing that we just cannot fill. That's constant. Businesses are stalling growth because they haven't got any means of growing further. They've not got the skills and the people. But why do we still have people doing really mundane jobs that can be handled through automation and robotics and, just even machinery? Looking at, when we talk about the automation side, you don't have to put a robot in. It's not the solution for everything. But you can automate processes to remove people from those processes and free those people to upskill and become decision makers and critical thinkers within the business at whatever level.
Hi, and welcome to Factbird's Manufacturing Matters podcast. I'm Michael, and today we'll be talking to Janet Bellamy from the University of Lincoln about change on the shop floor. And change is something that's very important for all manufacturers. There's plenty of different reasons for having to enact change programs, be it new technology, new processes, new ways of working with people. And we're very privileged to have the time to speak to Janet, who's Professor of Digitalization and Food Processing at University of Lincoln. Hi, Janet.
Hi, Michael. Good morning.
Thanks for joining. And I'm really excited to talk to you about, basically how can we help enact change on the shop floor, particularly in food and beverage manufacturing. So to begin with, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and where you work and what you do?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Janet Bellamy, as you've said. I lead the research into digital and emerging technology as part of the team at the University of Lincoln. My own background is 35 years plus in industry, leading manufacturing teams and designing new factories, new processes. And what I've done probably 7 years ago was move across into academia and hopefully bring some of that experience of industry and real life into the academic world. And the majority of what I do now is look at real world challenges for industry and how the research that is there can solve those problems. So a bit like matchmaking, in pairing the research with the challenge to actually give a solution to industry. I sit as part of the team at the National Centre for Food Manufacturing, and that building itself sits about 50 miles south of the main campus at Lincoln. And there's a reason it's there. It's because it's right in the heart of what we call Food Valley, with a huge amount of businesses in that area that are all big manufacturers that people will recognise on supermarket shelves. So we're there predominantly to serve the industry with skills provision, with research, and with consultancy, advice and support. And that's exactly what we do.
Yeah, it's a really cool initiative that you have. I've had the pleasure of meeting one of your colleagues, Trevor, in the past as well. Really good guy, and he also brings a wealth of knowledge from the field, actually. So working at a manufacturer and then before going into academia and giving people actual tangible solutions or tangible ideas to the problems that they're facing in manufacturing. And you've actually got your own production line, right?
We do, yes. So we've got a fully functioning food factory, and what we say is the majority of the team are industry academic hybrids. I mean, I sit in an office. When I first joined the university, I sat in an office of 4 people. Between those 4 people, we had 130 years industry experience, and you don't get that anywhere else. A lot of the time what we're saying to people is, if you know the answer to the question, you don't need an awful lot of support and a lot of input. And fortunately or unfortunately, we've made those mistakes in our career, and hopefully we're preventing other people from doing the same. So a lot of what we do is based on our real life experiences of working in those high pressure, low margin situations where you have to consider all parts of the decision, not just what's obvious in front of you.
Yeah, that's it must be so valuable for the UK food and beverage manufacturing industry in general. So it's really good work that you're doing. So let's get into it. So we're going to talk about change and how to manage change in manufacturing. But first of all, what types of change could there be that would be a challenge. Could you talk into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's, even just a change of working patterns can be a challenge for individuals. So, there's different impacts at different levels of the business. But I think, the majority of what we're seeing around now in terms of the economy, the environment that we're operating in, consumer demand, all of those put pressure on manufacturers. And, part of what consumers want is that unique product, that uniqueness. But all of our manufacturing systems are set up for bulk production, so that in itself is a challenge. How do you bring in personalized products and individualism to to a production environment that is geared to produce high volume at low margins?
Mm.
So the two don't fit together, but yet that's the way that the world is moving. So how do you respond to that? And you've got other pressures in there as well that are impacting. We've got skills shortages, we've got labour shortages in general, we've got lots of political issues that are getting in the way, whether that's the cost of energy, if it's efficiencies, regulations. And it's trying to map all those together into such a way that becomes a workable solution for a business. And the challenge is there isn't something off the shelf that you can just drop into a business to solve that problem. A lot of the time, these problems that we're facing require some level of interpretation and some level of change within the business, and that's where it's different, and that's why it's hard for businesses to recognize or see where these potential solutions are, because historically, if you've run out of capacity or you want to change a product, you just buy another piece of machine, or you extend the shed, or you can't extend the factory anymore. You've got to think of this in a different way. And what we're talking about is doing more with less. And that's a very different concept to get your head around. And you could argue that we've gone through the easy steps of lean and taken all of the low-hanging fruit away. And what we've got left now is some very tough decisions. I liken it to the Industrial Revolution, and I know other people do the same, but we are in the middle of that transformation. We just don't recognize it. And in some cases, we're probably 20 years into that cycle of transformation. And those that haven't started that journey and haven't started to make those changes are now finding themselves significantly behind everybody else and having to catch up, and really don't know where to start because, as I said, there isn't something off the shelf that you can just go and buy.
Yeah, it's a really good overview of the reasons for change. So, consumer preferences, people wanting more unique products. I guess, yeah. So having to have more and more SKUs as a manufacturer. How do you manage that? Yeah, the macro climate, pricing challenges. Yeah, having to be more efficient because of competition, I guess, as well. These are all major challenges across all industries, but I think it's particularly tough in food and beverage, right, where margins are lower, and it's typically a lot of older machines, maybe, compared to other industries.
Yeah, I mean, I can walk into a factory now and it doesn't look any different to how it did 30 years ago, So, I mean, that's a frustration for me because I know those solutions are there. And, for some businesses that does work, but it's not going to be, it's not the future. It's not going to guarantee you a future. And that's what those businesses are finding, that, it's not change for change's sake. It's change to improve and survive in some cases. This isn't about growth in a lot of cases. This is just about survival. And we've got this complex situation, I think, with food and drink. And I know farmers say this all the time, that food is too cheap. And quite frankly, it is. The margins are horrific. And, food and drink sector has very much been on the back foot and been the poor relation when it comes to funding, when it comes to support. And that's simply because, you've got these glamorous worlds of automotive and aerospace that not only do they do tech very well, but they also bring in high value and, generate huge amounts of cash. Poor old food doesn't do that, but, there would be, if you look at this in terms of value, what would it be if we didn't have food, and if that food supply chain broke down? The implications of that are absolutely unthinkable. So I think, when you talk about the value of food, yes, it might well be low value in terms of cash, but in terms of, survival, it's quite high up there. In fact, it's at the top. So there isn't that recognition or that investment that I think there should be to allow this to happen, as there has been in aerospace and automotive. And that's why we've seen those industries advance fairly quickly. You've had robotic solutions in automotive since the 70s. And it's just a shame that we've not had that same level of support and investment for the food and drink sector, given that, this is vital to life. This is pretty high up there when it comes to that hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, just because it's a commodity doesn't mean it's vital.
Yes.
My family of farmers would say things like, we help feed the world, right? And it's super important. And I've forgotten the attribution of it, but there's some quote around it's 9 meals between order and chaos. And I'll figure that out later when I'm doing the summary of this podcast.
It's about 3 days supply. We work, I think, in the average supply chain, food supply chain, is around 3 days. So that's pretty stark when you think about that it's all of this great industry, and there is something to say about that as well. We have the mindset, or I'm saying we, certainly that's something that I sort of inherited from working in food and drink, that you are constantly fighting, you are constantly pushing, because it is such a challenging environment, and lots of people can't hack it in that fast-paced environment. But you get to the stage where you don't actually feel like you've done a good job that day unless you've put out 3 Brazilian rainforest fires. You're in superhero mode constantly, and if you have a quiet day, you're constantly looking around to see, well, what's going to go wrong, because it's just not landed yet. You never actually relax and take on board this opportunity to just think, strategize, look at problem solving, because you are constantly dealing with those daily pressures. And it is getting better, businesses are getting better, but that's part of the problem as well. We don't feel like we've done a good job unless we've saved the world that day, and it's not just about saving the world. Sometimes just doing the job is enough.
I've talked to lots of people about that, the sort of firefighting mode. It can be really fulfilling, but it's also not what you really want to be doing. You don't want to be going around fighting fires. You want to be able to think ahead. No. And then that could be why you're bringing in change. So maybe you're bringing in things like preventive maintenance, or you're going paperless to help operators, or whatever. There's all these, or you're bringing in new processes, or you're changing from just a day shift or a day and night shift. Whatever it is, there's many things you can do to improve capacity and efficiency, or you got new machines. So thinking about, without discussing the different types of change too much now, what would then be the blockers to enacting change on the shop floor in particular?
I think the biggest one is people. I don't just think that's on the shop floor. I think that's at board level and all the way through management as well. You've got this lack of understanding of what digital is about in some cases. And moving on through Industry 5 and Industry 6, when you start to talk about merging man and machine and what those systems can look like and that way of working, I think there is a real blocker within the board, at board level and management level, to, well, we don't need that. We don't, I don't understand that. So there's this fear or uncertainty that they're going to look silly in front of others that do know a little bit more. And, that for me is a real issue, that if we're not sort of embracing this at board level and understanding the opportunities that this brings, we're not going to bring our teams along with us on that journey. And, people are naturally fearful, uncertain. They're anxious about their jobs. They're anxious about job security. They see automation and robotics coming in and think, well, I'm out because they're replacing me with a machine. And it's not about that at all. It's about upskilling. I mean, even now we've probably got 1 million vacancies within manufacturing that we just cannot fill. That's constant. Businesses are stalling growth because they haven't got any means of growing further. They've not got the skills and the people. But why do we still have people doing really mundane jobs that can be handled through automation and robotics, and just even machinery. Looking at, when we talk about the automation side, you don't have to put a robot in. It's not the solution for everything, but you can automate processes to remove people from those processes and free those people to upskill and become decision makers and critical thinkers within the business at whatever level. It's like a pilot landing a plane. The pilot's not needed during the flight, but for takeoff and landing, he is. And that's where, he takes over from autopilot. It's no different for the factories. We should have people doing critical roles that are important roles, and they should be paid accordingly. But what we do have is a huge amount of people doing basically what a line sorting machine can do.
Yeah. So people are the biggest blocker to change. People are afraid of change for very good reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the big picture, people are going to be needed more and more and more. So it's just about helping people do their jobs more efficiently.
Definitely. And it's the process as well. You've got changes that clash with existing workflows or add work that haven't probably been thought through. A lot of factories evolve, a lot of businesses evolve, and processes are added on, or we make changes in reaction to incidents that might have happened, but we never get the chance to go back and refresh. And when we look at something, it's very difficult to envisage that solution within our environment. And, you've got to remember that sometimes it's only small tweaks. It's not radical changes. Every change does not involve £1 million price tag or plus. It can be small incremental changes to process and to the way that you work that can actually improve that workflow or improve that efficiency and drop straight onto the bottom line. And, it's this perception. I think perception is another big blocker of not just perception from workforces that they're not involved in these conversations and I've got to do this because somebody's telling me I've got to work this way. I'm not involved in creating the solution, but also the perception and the assumptions that people make about the cost or the solution of what that's going to be. And, very much part of our role at Lincoln is to open up those opportunities and look across sectors. We work with military, we work with all of the sectors, and I'm not averse to bringing a surgical robot into a meat factory to look at butchering, because that's what this is about. We should be pairing and using that technology that's available, and that works. And there is an element of trust there that we're from industry, we're ex-industry, and therefore we understand the pressures and the needs. And we're not taking commission payments from anybody, so this is about what's best for that business, and that's what we work on. But that perception piece again is a real big one to actually break through. I wish I had a pound for every person that rang me in COVID and said, Janet, I need a robot. But it was, no, you don't need a robot. What the call now is slightly different. It's, Janet, I need AI. Where can I put AI in? But they don't understand what AI can do or what it is. And it is, when we go back to, the people and the way that you feel you're doing a good job, we're collecting all of this data, but we're just storing it because we never get a chance to look at it. And that's the other thing, again, it's this perception. We've got data there. But if you start talking to somebody about digital, the factory's nowhere near digital ready, but when you get to it, they're probably collecting 80% of the data that they need. They're just not doing anything with it, and that again is another issue. The real big blocker from me, from a technology point of view, is this fallacy of interoperability. And this is a real bugbear of mine. We talk about systems and we talk about plug and play and the connectedness of systems, and this whole thing is built on interconnectivity and interoperability, and it just doesn't exist. It doesn't exist unless you're buying something from a single supplier. You will have machines in your business, within your factory, systems that are all great, all have these sorts of management capabilities and data sorting capabilities. But in reality, you try and connect another machine up to it, or bring that data into something, or bring it into a dashboard, and it becomes mission impossible. It becomes a mammoth task to try and integrate or make that connect. And, you know, again, it's those things that make these systems and these suppliers competitive. It's the bit that gives them the competitive advantage that blocks that interoperability. And that's something we've got to get past, because if we do truly want to be in a digital world, we can't just be relying on one system that does that. And, you know, a factory may well have 7 machines in from 7 different suppliers. Those machines should be able to talk to each other, and they can't. They
Yeah,
don't.
it's a problem
You know,
everywhere, right? The
it is.
standardization. Yeah.
Yeah, it's via an API link. It's not real time. There's all sorts of challenges in the meantime, and certain manufacturers just won't let you have access to that data or their systems. So we've got to do something with that to be able to get past it.
I know that's basically why Factbird exists. Is this guy with for this consultancy agency, Amendo, was talking to Royal Unibrew, which is a big beverages manufacturer here, not Carlsberg, but a very good one, very good beers. I'm a big fan of their beers and lemonades and stuff.
Yeah.
And they sort of gave them the traditional option of an MES system and all of that, but it was far too expensive, and then it meant they were going to have to shut down the alliance, and which pushes out costs even more. So then he built this Edge IoT device that you can just retrofit on and sort of skip all the trying to figure out the interconnectivity of everything. Just plug the sensor in, count, shoot it to the cloud, and then analyze that way. And that's basically because of that problem of interconnectivity and getting machines to talk together, and the problem of getting real-time data to the cloud. That's useful. That's how Factbird's managed to build its business, and other companies. So it's a real problem. It was an opportunity for Factbird, but that's how it rolls. But yeah, it's a general problem in technology, right? There's all these different protocols. Nobody's really standardizing everything. Even in cellular, it's a mess. It's yeah. Maybe the AI will figure it out for us in the future. Who knows?
Hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a really good overview of the blockers to change on the people side and the technology side. So the people side, it's change is scary. That's one way to put it. And on the technology side is connectivity is a really big blocker. So then what have you seen through your time working with manufacturers and working at manufacturers as well? What have you seen as some good ways to help overcome these blockers to change?
I think it's been about communication, really. What I tend to see for more successful projects and adoptions is where the communication is very clear and honest, and you know that there is a definite proposal put forward that includes the workforce as well, that everybody's involved in that, and that it becomes this sort of co-design process of not just looking at what the art of the possible is for that particular business, but also how you're going to install that, or how you're going to make those changes, and having everybody part of that so that they're stakeholders within that piece. And I think that builds confidence, and it also exposes capability that you probably didn't know you had within the organization, and some level of interpretation of what's needed in terms of new ways of working, because what necessarily is an issue or a priority at management level isn't necessarily the same at shop floor level. And it's important to have all of those things captured when you're looking at solutions. And I think it's those leaders that aren't necessarily afraid of that level of improvement or openness that tend to succeed. And it is a very different culture within business. And I get that you can't go to the workforce with everything. But fundamental changes like this, it's good to involve people early on to make sure that design process is robust, and you know you're giving ownership to everybody for that solution. I think that works really well.
That's what I hear time and time again. Communication at the beginning. Don't just sort of come down from above or wherever. Be like, hey, here's this way of doing things now. Go do it. Like whatever you're doing, people need to buy into it first and internalize it and become like they need to see why it's beneficial for them and why it needs to happen.
And it is amazing. We use a system of process mapping. Again, nothing radical, But we go in and process map with businesses, but we do it across all levels of the organization. And it's surprising how many teams just sit there quite surprised at what is actually real, what's real life. There's an assumption that systems are being followed or processes are being followed in a specific way. But when you bring shop floor staff in and they're opening up about what goes on and how they handle things, and people again start to look at what's actually going on in the business, what does real life look like? It's a very different model. Even down to when you start to bring different departments together and you're looking at the process that you follow and why, and you're challenging and asking questions. Why do you do that? Again, it will come back to incidents where solutions have been changed or processes have been changed because there's been an issue or been a technical issue, an operational issue, and we've added an extra stage. Well, you've dealt with that issue now. You don't need to leave that stage in there, but nobody ever goes back and reviews. And what you get is a build-up of layers and a build-up of sort of what I call nonsense activities that are there just because. And, at what point does anybody actually go back and refresh that and say, why are we doing that? Why do we do it that way? You never get the chance. And just by putting everything there out in the open and looking at it is a really good way to start and say, what can we do now? And it's exactly the same with, when you start to look at driving efficiency and operational improvements through energy use, how many people have actually gone back in and balanced compressors or balanced the way that their defrost cycles work in their fridge plants, given the fact that they've probably had a 700% uplift on their energy bills? At what point have they actually gone in and done that? Because straight away that'll save you 30%. So it is, the obvious tasks are there, but it's going back to this approach and what you can do or what you feel you can do, and having the time to go in there and actually just do that piece of work. But you've got to involve everybody in that process, otherwise it just won't succeed.
So then it becomes giving your team time and empowering them to have these discussions, I suppose.
Definitely. And as soon as you do that, you're upskilling your team. You're mentoring your team rather. You're building confidence. You're building their confidence, and you're building their capability. And what you've got to do is give a little bit of that away, divest some of that responsibility to the team, let them have that power to be able to go out and have that impact, because you'll see the benefit from that. Because every time you divest those little decisions that are meaningless decisions that you can safely train and upskill people to take, you're building back time and capacity for yourself to do the critical thinking and to start to look at how you can change that and how you can change the way that you work and the way that you operate, or even just to analyze the data that's already there and understand how you can change and improve.
Yeah, so I guess it can come from many different levels as well. Maybe it's a line supervisor, maybe you have a continuous improvement team, maybe there's a new COO or something, and they have this idea like, hey, we need to step back and look at things. Maybe there's, as you said, too many layers of administrative burden or whatever it is, or maybe we need to go check the compressors. I don't fully understand that. I don't have a mechanical background, but it sounded good. I'll figure it out later.
I get excited about compressor balancing. It's just one of those things. I can't help it, but I know it, and because it generates cash. So it literally is just, if you've got 6 compressors, you don't need to run 6 compressors all at the same time. You balance when they're switched on, switched off, so that you're not just running everything flat out and costing yourself a fortune in kilowatt hours.
I think that's what we helped this company Danfoss do, sort of understand their standby time, and then how much it was costing them. But okay, thank you very much. But so you have, maybe there's a different champion for this idea of like stepping back and looking at things. How can they then within the organization, like what can they do to make it clear that this is necessary? We need to sort of step back and look at things.
I think that it's small wins, and every business responds to cash. You can go in with whatever great idea you want, but unless there's something hitting the bottom line, nobody's really going to take you seriously. And I think in the current climate that we have, it's a perfect opportunity. If you can identify some small wins that you think will generate some sort of improvement, then go for it. It doesn't matter if it's £1,000, but if you can start to get that practice and that work method in, then you gain credibility as you start to build up those projects. And I would start small but think big. Have a process of where you want to get to. But again, think about what those very sort of short-term hits are that will have impact, that get people to thinking in a different way, that, well, actually, yes, if we do this and we do take time to think about the, and analyze the data, this is what it could tell us. And you are just then building that credibility and starting to change the work pattern of what you do. And there's so much at the minute around waste reduction, energy efficiency. When we start to talk about carbon, everybody's on the carbon bandwagon. But if you start to talk about carbon at a senior level, when you're talking about cost savings, because that in effect is what it is. If you're saving carbon, you're saving money, because you're
more
reducing the
efficient.
amount of energy that you need to use. You're more efficient. Yeah, your productivity's gone up. So I think it's knowing who you're talking to and what their motivation will be, and trying to get motivation and buy-in from senior leadership. At the minute, their priority is going to be around profit and survival in some cases. In other cases, it will be growth, but I think very few will be focusing on growth. Most will be focusing on consolidation and survival. So I think, you're looking at how can I generate cash for that? And if you've got schemes, even short-term schemes and low-cost schemes that can hit those targets, they'll be interested and they'll be listening to you. Just think the language and the audience.
Yeah, that's such good advice. I think it's not just for food and beverage manufacturing. That's for
No.
every commercial organization. It comes down to the bottom line. And if you can show the cash value of some initiative, then you're going to be speaking the right language. And yeah, that was really good advice for everyone. I hope it helped focus some minds out there, and whatever change they're trying to get enacted to help them do that. So yeah, thank you so much for those insights. So what I'd like to ask now to end with would be looking ahead the next 5 years or something. What is it that, so yeah, as you said, we're in a period of consolidation right now. Really important, but looking ahead in the next 5 years or so, is there anything that you think it's vital for people in food and beverage manufacturing to consider?
Digitalization and AI is an absolute no-brainer. You've got to be in this. You've got to be doing it. You've got to be using it. But make sure you're using it wisely and you're using it in a way to drive improvements within the business. But it's that age old. If you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. So you need to understand what it looks like. But that isn't about surrounding yourself with 7 warehouses full of paper. It's about having data at your fingertips in real time, and only keeping and processing the data that's actually adding meaning to what you're trying to achieve. So it's being very targeted in what you're doing with that. But don't be afraid of AI. AI is just a decision-making tool that will help speed up the decisions and, your reaction times. If you think that the human brain can make 10 decisions in a minute, and some of these programs are making 10,000 decisions a minute, so the problem's already solved before it's even started, so you don't actually notice there's a problem there. So think about where you can unlock AI and where you can actually take advantage of that within your processes. I don't think sustainability is going to go away, but for me, sustainability with my ops head on is more around, as I said, waste reduction, energy efficiency, and looking at cost reduction in terms of what I'm doing and what I'm producing. So wasting less, and that's just good manufacturing practice. So again, if you're doing all of that, you're naturally hitting your green net zero targets anyway. So, do what do what you do, and make sure that your cost reduction is front and foremost of what you're working on. And, that consumer piece isn't going to go away. The pressure's going to get worse. We're going to have shorter runs, higher varieties, and flexibility is going to be key in that. So you need to think about how you can make your manufacturing processes more flexible, more agile. And it's not always about technology, and that seems a bit strange coming from a professor of digitalization and emerging tech. But, that has to start with people. And if you're not starting with people, understanding the fears, the motivations, communicating with them, training them, empowering them, then all you're going to get is resistance, and that change is just not going to happen because you can't do it on your own. It has to be shared, and it has to be a shared journey. You've got to have people working together, teams working together to actually achieve that. So start with your people, because that's where you'll make your early gains, and that builds the confidence to then bring the technology in and make the technological changes.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. There's nothing I can add to that. That was amazing. So just to finish off, if anybody would like to reach out to you or to find out more about what you're doing at the University of Lincoln, is there any particularly good channel that they can use?
Yes, you can go through the university website, and there is a link there to NCFM, or you can just email me directly at jbellamy, no dot, at lincoln.ac.uk.
Cool.
But more than happy for people to get in touch.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty good website. I was flicking through that last week, and it's the NCFM is the National Center of Food Manufacturing.
It is. We're on LinkedIn as well, and
Okay.
we're also across most platforms. So please just do reach out to us, and yeah, we'd be really, really happy to hear from you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. And now Gabriel's going to cut it.